So thanks for joining me today. Basically, my name is Eric Morgan. I'm with Organic Approach in Pennsylvania, and what we're going to do is we're going to plant a sweet bay magnolia today. It's a potted plant. Of course, I am a little bit preferential to B&B, but we're going to do a potted plant. We're guessing that this plant's probably pot bound. We've got some disease activity on it, which isn't really normal per se for a sweet bay magnolia in our area, and it's also got some leaf miner insect activity going on, which again really isn't common, if you will, in our area. So eventually those things will pass because we'll get the plant healthier, but right now the plant is under stress, and we definitely suspect it's because of the pot-bound nature of the plant, but we'll see, and root-bound. In addition to that, there's some tags on here. One tag is a little bit looser, but the other one is extremely tight, and just a vinyl tag like this at the bottom is enough to actually girdle that whole stem, cut off the vascular flow down here, and this limb will just shut down because, you know, all your vascular flow, xylem and phloem, is really basically on the outside of the branch, just under the bark, and being just under the bark, I'll call you back in a minute, thanks. Just being under the vascular system or under the bark, that little bit of vinyl tag can really constrict that vascular flow. So we're going to get that off, and we're going to cut ourselves a hole. So that's your prelim. All right. So basically, when I take a plant like this, first thing I'm going to do is say, you know, I want plenty of room around the outside for my hands to be able to work in the outside of the hole. And I like to score the line first so that I can get the sod off quickly. Sometimes you don't have sod, it's just dirt. So, just score it, and then we'll go from there. All right, so take that, get my sod off. Might be able to use that sod somewhere else a little bit later. It comes off in one nice piece. Not always the case. It's that nice organic side. Earlier this year we did this, and we had a gentleman who, from his house, came up after a bunch of different plantings, and he asked if he could steal our sod. He came back up for weeks taking sod clumps and using them in his property to basically establish lawn where he had not been able to do it. Said it was some of the finest grass he's ever seen, so he was happy to do it. So that's essentially our beginning of our hole. I'm just going to dig that hole up real quick. I like to start in the middle. By starting in the middle of the hole, I relieve some of that pressure. You'll see what I mean in a minute. If you have a compacted soil, this is very helpful. But basically, I get the center cleared out. And then that way, when I'm digging the next ring out, it's a lot easier. There's nothing pushing against this side, so it just pops right out for you. You can see we have nice soil. That's that whole organic thing that everybody sometimes wants when they see how nice it is to work in. Obviously, I use a board here, so I'm not messing up customers' property unnecessarily. This is the kind of work I really enjoy. I'm purposely not going too deep, but when I'm done with this ball, we might find that I'm still a little deep when you see how it is that I work a ball. I like the final planting to be, you know, somewhat above grade. I feel that far more plants die from from, that's the benefit of having a nice sharp shovel. But far more plants perish from being planted too deeply. And so what we'll do is there's a big root in here. I can show off and take that out, but I'm gonna try not to deal with it. So that's not actually too bad. I've seen far worse. I'm sure many of the people watching this video have also seen far worse. That's pretty good, actually. So this might go much more easily than one would have first thought. Now, I like to tease all those roots. I don't know if I'm shading the ball a little bit, so I'll move myself to the side.
Looks good.
But basically, that's our objective right there. Get those roots kind of loosened up. Roots tend to have a memory, so if they are encircling the ball and working their way around like that, all the way around the ball, roots have a memory. They will hold that. Even if you try to tease them, they'll still want to go that way. That's when you kind of have to start thinking about snipping roots and trying to help them get a good, healthy start. This is actually a fairly decent root system. I'm totally surprised. That blew me away. I'm not sure I want all that soilless medium there. I believe when you put a plant in the ground, if you want it to perform, you don't want a lot of soil amendments. I want the general soil texture that is native to this area to be what I backfill with primarily, because I want the plant to not decide it likes its hole too much. I want the plant to decide that, you know, well, it's no better right here next to me, next to my ball edges, than it is 5 feet out. So I'm just going to start spreading my wings and expand itself. So the root system, I want it to work. I want it to work for itself. I want it to exploit the surrounding soil and just start moving out. So I don't like a lot of soil amendments in the backfill. Not a lot of peat, moss, perlite, all that kind of stuff. If they are harsh conditions, I really am almost preferential to giving the plant the ingredients, biostimulants and whatnot that it needs in order to contend with its short-term stress, and then do back drenches, which we'll talk about in the aftermath of this little planting session, to help begin to loosen the soil, feed the biology, naturally aerify the soil, which allows the plant to start exploiting that soil and finding all those beautiful natural resources out there 2 feet out, 3 feet, 5 feet, whatever, 10 feet, as the plant matures. So we've got a pretty nice ball, but if you see this right now, I don't like how low that's sitting. Now, some other people might be fine with that, but I don't like that. So, and I also like to, if you see what I'm doing right now, I'm burying the flare. So I like to see the flare of the trunk, because if I don't see that flare, and if it looks like a straight telephone pole going straight into the ground, then I don't have a flare visible, and the bark tissue on that flare needs to dry out. If it doesn't dry out, we're going to start seeing different butt and root rot diseases and so on and so forth, due to constant moisture being held against the bark tissue that doesn't want to have that. So I err on the side of making sure my flare is adequately exposed. Oftentimes this area right here on top of the ball, you're going to find a lot of root congestion once you bare the flare, so to speak. So that's a new phrase of the day, bare the flare. I'm going to set that plant back out. Look how small that ball looks now in terms of height. That's very small. And that hole is too deep, so we actually went too deep in my opinion. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to bring that soilless medium out that fell off when I was bearing the flare, and I'm going to throw some soil back into this hole. I'm going to firm it up because I don't want it to settle and have my ball sink. So a lot of you people may be bored because you've done this a million times. This is for those that want a little tutorial, a little bit of quick experience so that they can do things well first time. So I never try to put too much soil in it at one time. I try to do it in 2 or 3 inch lifts, maybe 3 or 4 tops, and then pack it, because you can't take soil this deep and pack it quickly. So I do it in 2 or 3 inch lifts generally, probably 3 to be honest. Now that's firmed up, but I'm gonna suspect I still need more soil for the way I like to plant plants. Yeah, that's still low for me. So you'll see why in a minute. So I'm gonna put a little more soil in. Apologize. Should be able to do this faster for you. I can always pull a little out. It's hard to put it back in once you're done planting. So that looks like a pretty shallow hole. I get it. Now let's see where we're sitting here. Again, you'll notice that I try to get a few of these roots kind of out from under the ball a little bit.
Lean that flat shovel across the top of the ball so you can see that bit of reveal.
Well, here's where that flat shovel would be sitting on the ground. You know, right like that. So I'm up a bit. That doesn't scare me personally. Eventually what I would do is actually, so I'm feathering the crown of the ball. I call this the crown. Maybe other people do too. I just go by what I've done and it works. There's some nice roots coming out here. They'll all get their cover soon enough here. But I call this the crown, and we'll bring our soil up to the crown in a minute. And then at the end, you know, I might not do it today, but we could take a little more sod and make this a dressed up planting. But for now, we're just going to do this. So basically what I want to do is we have a product called EETP, and I just realized my vinyl tags are still on here. We're going to take those off so they don't girdle that branch anymore. Doesn't look like it got severe enough to cause any harm yet. Probably one more year of pushing with some nitrogenous fertilizers in the nursery to get nice salability size, and there would have been a little bit more girdling going on. And I just had to pull that out from that crotch of that branch, so that was going to girdle that branch in that V pretty soon. So probably within the next year it would have been very hard to get out. I'm going to take a little of this Hyphalink EETP. This is a mycorrhizal formula that we make. It's got a lot of our other ingredients that we manufacture in here. Other ingredients that we found have worked in a multitude of woody ornamental situations and herbaceous situations. But I'm going to take it and I'm just going to dust the roots a little bit, because there is a dust in this product, and that dust is some of the mycorrhizal spores, and I want them to be right up against and on those roots as I get ready to backfill. So push my soilless medium out of the way. I really don't want that in this situation, to be honest. As you've heard me before, my plywood should be closer for my liking. And then I'm just going to start mushing a little bit of soil up. I don't have to get rid of every single soil clod, but I am going to loosen it up a little bit. Put some down in there. Remember, as we're doing this, remember we bared the flare. It's very important, because had we not bared the flare, we would have thought our root ball was up here and we'd have thought our root ball was too high. Once we bared the flare, now we see we can bring that ball up further to give it ample breathing room up out of the soil, so that flare can dry as it needs to prevent future disease activity, which of course won't happen until your plant warranty is all expended. So, but in any case, you'll see that I just put around 2 to 3 inches of soil in this plant hole, maybe 2.5 or so, so put a little bit more. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit more mycorrhizae. You don't got to get out of hand here. A little bit more mycorrhizae, you'll often see me go like this along the edge of the ball. Why? Because mycorrhizae don't care to be way out there. They want to be up against the edge of the ball. Why? Because mycorrhizae need to make root contact in order to sporulate and grow. So we did that, and now what I do is I take my fingers and I just kind of push that mycorrhizae in close proximity to that ball so it's getting up against those roots. That's the first thing I do on the first backfill attempt on the sides of the ball. And then what I do is I take my hand and I just loosely do this. You do not have to compact it to a point where it cannot perk water, because obviously you want water to get to this plant. So there are many ways you can do this. If the soil is very rocky and you don't want to beat your knuckles up, you can take your shovel and you can do this sort of thing. Other people take their feet and kind of stomp on it and firm it up, but just don't tamp it too hard, okay? So now you have to come further up the ball, put more soil in here. You'll see me occasionally throw out a big root, just don't need that in my way. Big rock, big root. I'm gonna go close to the top right now in the interest of time, but you'll see how I kind of compensate for that because I'll do that fingering in of the mycorrhizae. So now, again, it's loose. My backfill is loose on this layer of backfill. I'm going to take my mycorrhizae again. I'm going to stay close to the edge. I'm not way out here. I'm close to the edge of the original root ball. And when I finger the mycorrhizal inoculum in, I'm going to do it in such a way that my fingers are kind of angled toward the ball. And I really don't need to go far and hard because I just did it 2 inches below that in the last layer. So now I'm just going to take my loose soil and go up over what I fingered in, which takes a little bit of that mycorrhizae that I didn't get with my fingers and pushes it toward the ball.
That's because it requires root contact to live, right?
Yep. You got to have the mycorrhizae. There's a symbiotic relationship between mycorrhizal fungi, which are beneficial fungi, and roots. The roots are feeding the mycorrhizae all sorts of beautiful photosynthetic carbohydrate sugars, and then the mycorrhizae sporulate, much like the seed germinates, if you need an analogy in your head, and the mycorrhizae begin to grow, and they look a lot like these white little filaments here. If you can see that white strand, that would be the kind of thing you're looking for a mycorrhizal hyphae. And so they grow just like that, from a tiny little spore, and one end is connected to the root and the other end goes out into the soil and exploits the soil for water and nutrients and what have you. At the same time, the end connected to the root is protecting the root from various diseases and pathogens. So there's a whole symbiotic relationship. The plant feeds the mycorrhizal hyphae, and the mycorrhizal hyphae brings important ingredients to the plant for purposes of photosynthesis and protection and all sorts of other stuff. So completely symbiotic relationship. It's a great deal for both parties. So I like to end up with a plant that almost looks like it's like this. And I like that because I know my plant is well above the ground. It's not going to sink and end up too shallow. So I'm just going to taper here like so, and maybe we'll take a brief break in a minute here and grab a little mulch so we can give you the actual final effect with some mulch. And I can widen the side ring a little bit too. But in any case, excuse me, you see basically the finished effect we're going to come off with here. Most of our roots are all back under soil, okay? But our stem, we've bared the flare, and that is really important to do. So bare the flare, and look at that, we've used just about every bit of the original topsoil that came out of that hole. And the nice thing about this is, in the end, if we had extra soil, what we would do is we would widen this sod by about this much the whole way around, and then we'd take some excess soil and we'd create a little bit of a donut, if you will, with the excess soil. And then that way, when the homeowner or whomever decides to water, their water would kind of settle in right around here, which would be about where the outside of our original ball was. So we'd make a little donut like this, so when it rains, that water wants to settle in right here, water our ball short term. Eventually that donut will just kind of compress itself and gravitationally subside, and the mulch would cover that donut. You wouldn't even see it. So if we take a break, I'll get a little bit more of this sod off, and then we'll throw a little bit of mulch on for fun, kicks and giggles, and we'll be done. All right, thank you. All right, so while someone was helping me get a little bit of mulch to the side here, I quick did my circle scoring like I showed you in the beginning of the video, and I just did it enough that I can take a collar of sod off here, widen our planting position, so to speak. And all I'm doing is taking that sod off one section at a time, throwing it in my sod pile over there, which is becoming a rather large sod pile. And this is the thing that gives me probably the most peace, is doing this kind of work. I love labor. Pretty peaceful. Keeps me from falling over as well. So I can make an edge out of this too. Like I can use this opportunity to make that donut for water, and also make an edge to hold the mulch, if you will. Oh yeah, look at that. One of those organic worms we talk about all the time. He's a little guy. We got ones as long as my hand for sure here. And again, this is kind of going to work out really well in the end. Oh, but I'm misguiding you a little bit here, because there was one step that I forgot that was and is very important to me on all of my plantings that I like to do. And that step is I did not plumb the plant, which is like a major no-no. So I usually get up and walk all four sides, make sure that it's presentable and it's more or less straight up and down. I call that plumbing the plant, as a carpenter would plumb, a door frame or a post for a deck or whatever the case might be. She's in the ground pretty well, which is good, but I just found the outside of the ball, which is great, because I'll just tuck down a little bit there, kind of to use as a shim, if you will, another carpentry term. And so basically it looks good the whole way around, and I'm doing this now because when I walk away from this right now, I'm going to be done. I'm not going to come back to it. So we'll take that soil from our edging work and we'll just do this. Notice we're still preserving the flare that we bared. And this soil mound or donut doesn't need to be excessively permanent, because the plant's going to grab hold by the time it breaks down. A little that excess off there. Do this. Now our tree is pretty plumb, straightened up, and she looks high. Some people would argue that. I don't, because I've seen what happens by putting them up like this. I get outstanding development of the tree, the woody ornamental. Now let's insulate it for winter. So let's take our mulch. Again, this mulch does not have to be right up against the stem. What are we trying to insulate? We're trying to insulate the roots and the area just outside the roots, because in fact, if we insulate that area just outside the roots, where will the roots want to grow in colder times of year? Toward the heat. So what we're going to do is we're going to warm it up out toward the edge a little bit. And then when all this is done and we have all our mulch in place, then someone from our company would come back, Josh or whomever, and they would back trench this plant with a biostim cocktail that we basically manufacture and use in our tree division. Depending on the situation, we would be using our Nourish or our Influence products. Nourish is a dry, soluble powder biostim cocktail. Nourish is a liquid concentrate biostim cocktail. And if you see me, I'm trying to take this mulch kind of out and heel it in on the edge so that homeowner or whomever, when they mow, their wheel can run right around the edge here. But we'll use fish and mycorrhizae in our back drench, and we have another mycorrhizal product called Hyphalink EEI, and like that other one I used when planting, it has the mycorrhizae and different ingredients in there to feed the proliferation and successful establishment of the mycorrhizae, but it's all soluble. The Hyphalink EEI is soluble for putting into a soil injection tank or soil drench tank, and won't clog your tips and filters and all of that fun stuff. So basically what you see is we've just planted a tree. Let's say it's 100 plants on a site. We'll just come back with one big tank mix and we'll water them all in. Soil inject if necessary. Generally on plantings like this we would soil drench, because the tip of the soil injection probe would force displacement of soil. It's already loose soil down there, we don't need to do that here. So probably just drenching, and we would just focus it right in here. Notice after the mulching we have a donut that's going to capture our water, bring our water in to the ball, the original ball, but at the same time we've preserved our root flare. We can even let a little bit of mulch slide in there. It's kind of like a little blanket, if you will, but we don't want the mulch really even sitting up against that root flare. That's the whole goal. So there you have it. That's a planting of a sweet bay magnolia, relatively decent soil, mulch ready to go, ready for a soil drench in this case, some biostims to help with stress reduction of the root system, the plant in general. Our biostim cocktails like Influence and Nourish, they'll help you right through all sorts of stressful situations going into the summer, or right in the middle of the summer when you have to do a transplant. You have to malign the roots because it was root bound. You want those roots to respond with rapid growth and reestablishment. You can do that with those biostim products like Nourish and Influence. But you can also use our hydrolyzed fish, which is called Nature's Essence FH, FH standing for fish hydrolysate. Fish hydrolysate is not a fish emulsion. Use the hydrolysate because it's got all the biologically active compounds still in it, where an emulsion is typically a heat-treated product which has very much harmed or killed the biologically active compounds in the emulsion. So use a hydrolysate that has all of that wonderful biologically active compound stuff going on, and that's just simply going to help your soil become more healthy, more alive, and more vital, and more active. And that's it. So I hope you all have success in your future planting endeavors. Thanks for joining us today. Take care.